I would like to introduce.
Cue the music.
Yeah. A little background music going for us here. Get the mood.
Thank you.
I would like to introduce Kerri Kennedy. She's the Executive Director of Women's Campaign International, and she is the chair of our roundtable today. And to her left is Sara Mazano-Diaz, Director of the Women's Bureau for the U.S. Department of Labor. And we're very honored to have both of you here.
Thank you.
having us. And with that, we will get started.
Okay, great. We have one other panelist, Marjorie Margolies, who is the founder of the organization Women's Campaign International that I am the director of. She teaches a class in Philadelphia on Tuesday nights, so she was coming early today. We hope she'll catch she'll be here for the tail end of this one, but she will definitely be here for our next presentation. So if you wanted to meet her, please feel free to come back if you miss her during this session. So we are. Again, I'm Kerri Kennedy. I'm the Executive Director of Women's Campaign International and the chair of this roundtable. And we've been working the past 9 months with about 10 women's organizations to really brainstorm about global women's issues in the United States, global women's issues abroad and in the United States today. It's been a very rewarding process, so we're going to share our findings. We're going to start with Sara Mazano-Diaz, who's really going to open up today's discussion and talk about women's issues in the United States. And again, she is the director of the Women's Bureau for the Department of Labor, and she started this year, and she's a fantastic representative of women's issues in the Department of Labor. So we were lucky to have her on this roundtable, and we're honored to have her here today.
Thank you so much, Kerri. So sweet.
Good morning. How are you? All right. Is the adrenaline flowing yet? All righty. Need that second cup? I know I do. First of all, I am just delighted to be here with all of you today. Thank you so much for having me here, Kerri, and it's been really wonderful working with your organization and with Marjorie. And also want to congratulate the sponsors of this event, because this is a wonderful, wonderful idea of bringing people together to talk about these issues. I believe it's really important to have the opportunity to discuss economic empowerment as part of this summit, and in particular for women and girls, because economic empowerment is essential to the survival of families, right, as we know. It is also creates healthy societies, but also it is great for the economic development of the nations, including our own. Empowering women means recognizing their talents, their capabilities, and it means honoring their equality. Women and girls must be granted full participatory rights in their own respective societies. They must have political, social, and economic rights, and they must be free from discrimination, exploitation, and oppression. The economic well-being of women in any society is inextricably linked to the involvement of the business community. For over 90 years, the Women's Bureau has been, as part of the Department of Labor, has been a catalyst for change. We were created 2 months before women had the right to vote in the United States, and we've been around for 90 years being the public advocate on behalf of working women. We've had the opportunity to advance and protect the rights and safety of working women in the United States. And our goal is to empower all working women to achieve economic security. This means preparing women for higher paying jobs of the 21st century, which we know are green jobs, STEM jobs, skilled trades, and white collar. This also means ensuring fair compensation and promoting workplace flexibility so that there's more balance between work and family responsibilities. And last but certainly not least, helping our homeless women veterans reintegrate into the workforce. In the United States, women have made significant economic progress in recent decades. Today, women own more businesses, they are self-employed, and manage many business operations in Fortune 500 companies, and are often included in decision-making processes. Today, there are more women in the workplace, more women in the role of breadwinners and co-breadwinners, and more women holding multiple jobs. In fact, 60% of all women across the United States are in the labor force. 63% of women who have children under the age of 6 actually work outside of the home. Women comprise 2/3 of all part-time workers, which has huge implications because many of these part-time workers have no benefits, such as health benefits and retirement benefits, which has a long-term impact. But even while progress has been made, women still lag behind men in most of the key indicators. Even though women hold the majority of post-secondary degrees, and even though employment has grown, pay equity is still an issue. Women are still paid less than men for the same job and only earn about 80 cents to $1 from what men earn. The gap is even larger for African American women, which at this point is about 69 cents to $1, and is even greater for Latinas, which is 60 cents on $1. So although inroads have been made, unfair pay practices still obviously exist, and women still are concentrated in what is lower paying traditional female jobs. Women have the degrees, and they have the need. They have the capacity, and yet still face barriers in equal employment opportunities. They're still segregated in terms of lower paying jobs, and they continue to be denied access to real economic security. This is not just a woman's issue, it is a family issue. It's a society's issue, and it's a national economic issue. When you have nearly 50% of your workforce comprised of women, it becomes a real global economic issue, whether the country is the United States or any other country. So what are the solutions? If we're going to ensure women are granted full participation in the economic growth of a country and achieve some of the kinds of personal and economic security, what should we be doing? The strategy of the Women's Bureau for achieving these goals is to create opportunities for women in higher paying jobs. And as we know, how do we get there? First is by education. Education is the most effective resource, and it has to come first. Women have to be guided to enter non-traditional fields such as the green jobs, such as skilled trades, and the STEM arena, because we know that those are the higher paying jobs of the 21st century. Right now, fewer than 10% of women are employed in these kinds of jobs. The Women's Bureau is focused on encouraging workplace flexibility so that women don't have to choose between a job and their family responsibilities. It is a priority of the Bureau, and we are determined to beat back the wage gap between men and women. This kind of discrimination must end. President Obama's National Equal Pay Enforcement Task Force is a strong indication of this administration's commitment to ending the wage gap. Every day we look for new avenues to be able to enable women and to assist them by providing tools for financial security at all stages of their lives. Many of you are in leadership positions in your own organizations or businesses. You understand the importance of the development, both personal and professional, the professional connections that we all need to move forward. This is part of what we're doing this week. We are here more than just to have a discussion, but we're really here to make an impact. So the second thing that I would suggest as a solution is engagement. We need to provide leadership to help other women develop work-life strategies, including the ability to develop personal and professional connections like the ones that we're making here today. We also need mentors. We need to build strong support systems to assist women to be recruited, retained in these employments. The other piece of the equation is mentorship. Mentorship is critical. Education doesn't stop at the entry level. As you know, mentoring women as they move up the corporate career ladders or the other ladders within their organization is critical, and it helps them move into much more meaningful positions. Another solution is access to information. Access to information is a game changer. Social media in this century is going to be one of our most successful tools in reaching out to women and providing them with the concept of a broader horizon. In addition to that, training is a critical component. We must provide leadership training as well as job training. We must teach women about the political process and how they can participate in all aspects of their society, as well as their culture. Finally, we must also collaborate with the private sector. We must create partnerships within the private sector to provide mentoring and job opportunities for women. I believe that the manner in which a country treats its women is a measure of a just, ethical, and healthy society. Let me say again, women and girls must be granted full participation in all aspects of society. We must have political, social, and economic rights, and they must be free from discrimination, exploitation, and oppression. Thank you all.
Okay, so thank you, Sara, that was wonderful. What we'll do for the rest of the morning for this presentation, I will give a brief overview of some of the challenges that women face globally, and these are the challenges that the roundtable decided to highlight. We'll then talk about some success stories, and then talk about ways that people can get involved. And at some point, I'd really like to hear from you, from the people in the room who's here. Can you just raise your hand if you already work in the field of women's issues in some way? Okay, great. So I'm sure there's a lot of resources here. Part of citizen diplomacy is engaging with each other and sharing, so we want to leave some time at the end so that we can hear some best practices and trends that maybe we didn't cover that you have covered. As we say in the field of women's issues, there could be thousands of groups doing the work, and there will still be a ton of work to be done. So, a lot of people say, oh, you're another women's group, and we say, there's not enough. There's so much to do. So we want to hear from you what you're doing. Let's start with just showing a quick video. Just want to show the Girl Effect, which has anybody seen this? It's a very powerful short film. I can watch it over and over and over again, and they do a great job of. Are you with the Girl Effect, or? Oh, okay. So you never know who's in the room if somebody's with the Novo Foundation or Nike. But let's show this quick video. And this is Nora. She's with Women's Campaign International. $5 million adults in this world are illiterate. 2/3 of those illiterate adults are women. Women's Campaign International works in emerging democracies and post-conflict countries. In post-conflict countries, that number is even greater. I recently conducted an assessment in Liberia where I was meeting with hundreds of rural women leaders, so women who had been elected to leadership in their communities. Out of the women leaders that I met there, 85% were illiterate. Now, they could write their names, but they had very low functioning literacy. And these were mostly older women that were displaced during the conflict, which traditionally happens in post-conflict countries. So 2/3 of the 875 million adults in the world are illiterate, and those are women. We know that education, if we were able to see the girl effect, we would, and hopefully we can see it afterwards, they really focus on this. We know that the easiest way to make a difference in the community is to educate a girl. We've always thought this, people in this field, we've always thought that educating girls are the way to have an impact in the community, but really studies have been done, and it has been proven that when a girl in a developing country receives 7 or more years of education, she marries 4 years later. Now, if you're a 13-year-old girl, 4 years is a huge difference. If you're a 17-year-old girl, 4 years is a huge difference. That means you can continue your education. They have 2.2 fewer children, and they're able to create some kind of economic career for themselves. We know that when women are educated, they spend more resources in their community. When a woman is educated and starts to work in her community, we found out that this quote is being debated, so I'm not sure of the exact number, but that woman reinvests about 80% of her incomes into her family and a community versus a man who reinvests about 30% of his earnings into the community. So we know, educate girls, get girls to work in their community, and they are going to enrich not only themselves and their children, but their whole village, their whole community. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, take a minute and just look to the left of you and look to the right of you. So if you have a woman, and for the men, just pretend you're a woman for a second, because we don't have the stats on men. If you are a woman, 1 of 3 women in the world are sexually abused, raped, or beaten. So if we have about 30 people in this room, that means 10 of us have experienced this. This is not just an issue in the developing world. This is a large issue in the United States. As you see, 22% of the women in the United States, about 1 in 4, have been sexually abused, raped, or beaten. The number increases and is even higher in post-conflict countries or emerging democracies. And we find a discomforting trend in post-conflict countries is that after during the conflict, it's brutal because it's a tactic of war. After the conflict, it tends to continue, and sometimes it even increases because women are coming back and trying to revitalize their community. Men sometimes have been displaced if they were combatants or if they were in a war and now they're trying to find their place. We find, unfortunately, that in post-conflict environments, for the first 5 years, violence tends to increase. So this is a global issue. This is not just in the United States. This is not just overseas. This is something that women face everywhere. And we have to educate our girls about, and our men about how to respect each other and how to respect women. Okay. Sara really focused on this, so I'm just going to zip through it. But women in the world perform 66% of the work. We produce 50% of all the food that is consumed by people. Yet we earn 10% of the income, and we own, who wants to just take a guess? How much land do we own? Yes, that's it, 1%. We own a mere 1% of the land, which is atrocious. I mean, that's enough that everyone should be stopping right now, and we should figure out how we change that. It's awful. So we'll go on. Okay, sexual and reproductive health. This is a problem. This is not really a huge problem in the United States, but in developing countries, there's a really high number of maternal deaths. 4 out of 5 of those maternal deaths could be prevented if there was a trained midwife or a nurse or some kind of emergency care worker in the region. There are a lot of great initiatives that are happening right now, like mobile nursing units. I know there's a lot of organizations like the Gates Foundation that are working on trying to train midwives and get them out into rural areas. I've spent the past 15 years working in international development, and I've worked in very, very rural places. And I know you do not want to get sick in those very rural places where you have to travel hours to get to the next health clinic. And when I was there, when I was in, say, in the South Pacific or in Africa, I had a car, I had resources. We have interacted with women, and we've supported women that, say, have had fistula and have walked weeks, literally weeks, to get to a health clinic to have something that is very fixable. Fistula is a tear. It's a disease in which there is a tear in where's the tear? It's a obstructive, is that the right word? Obstructive? Thank you. I'm pregnant, so sometimes I have pregnancy brain. I don't remember all the words that I'm trying to say. There's a tear that is caused if a woman sometimes has birth too young, or the baby's too large and she doesn't have emergency medical supplies. This can be fixed in with a few surgeries. But if you're in a rural area, you just don't have access to those surgeries. Because of that tear, women tend to leak and smell and be shamed by their community. In Ethiopia, we've come across many stories where women are hidden away in a small room in their village and really isolated and abandoned because people don't want to be around somebody that smells and leaks and makes them feel uncomfortable. So this is something that organizations like Women's Campaign International and other groups have to address because we can. We have supported a fistula hospital in Ethiopia that does amazing work, brings these women in who travel weeks at a time, and they get there and they perform these surgeries for free, and then they help reintegrate them into their communities or find a living space for them. Okay, so that's some of the challenges that we face around the world. One more stat that we didn't include in here, women's political participation. Women's Campaign International was founded by Marjorie Margolies, who's a member of Congress, was a member of Congress. She had to teach a class at the University of Pennsylvania last night, so she'll be here soon. But she started this from the Beijing Conference on Women because there were not enough women at the political table. Our organization was founded to get more women to office and then to really work with them to improve their legislative ability and their ability to mobilize peoples once they were in power. So women represent 50% of the world's population. Who can tell me how many women there are in Congress right now? Rough guess. 17%, right. I think it was 18%. I think it actually went down to 17% this year, unfortunately. Does anybody know who has the highest percentage of women in parliament? Yes, who said that? Yes, Rwanda, which is, people are surprised by that, and we'll talk about why that may be. And Rwanda is a great case study of a country that has really turned around and engaged women. Okay, so our mission here, WCI focuses in post-conflict countries. That's our niche because we find that there are greater needs and opportunities to work with women leaders in post-conflict spaces. And so we work in places like Afghanistan, Liberia, Sri Lanka, Colombia. If there is a conflict, we have been there. And we really try to engage women in peace building and community revitalization. Okay. It's just a broad description of where we work. Okay, so Women's Campaign International, we started with this political participation model. But everybody in this room knows if you cannot feed your family, if you cannot send your children to school, and if you do not feel safe, it's very difficult to think about leadership. I mean, it is very difficult to spend any time in your community in a public forum if you are still struggling with those basic needs, feeding your children, sending your children to school, and conflict. So we decided that in order for us to be more comprehensive, we have to address these other three models, and that's sustainable livelihoods. How can women earn a living and feed their families? Civic education. We actually only work in countries where there is a strong or emerging civil society run by women, because we find that women leaders need other women. They need those networks to be supportive. We all do. We all need groups of women that will help us push our work up and help support us when we have a cause. And it doesn't just have to be women. We actually, all of our programs focus on engaging men We work in countries where there can easily be a backlash if we don't engage men in these conversations. And it's a question we have a lot. People say, well, what happens about the men if you're working in these conflict zones? And we really bring them in as early as possible. And peace building and conflict mitigation. How do you get women to really be engaged in the peace process? Let's just throw out another guess. Can anyone tell me how many UN chief conflict negotiators there are right now? You really know. You're the stats woman in this group. There are 0, none, not one. And the UN is the largest proponent of the 1325 Act, which is the act that really stipulates that all countries engage 50% of women in peace building. So if you're working in a country, 50% of the participants in a peace process should be women. 6% of the women around the world, 6% of women are engaged in formal peace negotiation processes. I once had to do a training for the Sudanese Women's Caucus, which is the only multi-party caucus in Sudan, working towards the comprehensive peace agreement. So we were able to negotiate with the members of parliament, and get women to the table. We had about 10 women to join this group of about 30 men. 10 women joined this working group. And they were discussing, they had a map of Sudan, and they're actually dividing up the map to say, okay, well, this is in this region, this is in this region. We can our tribe or our group controls this territory, this district, this is my constituency, I'll control this. And they were fighting over this one river bed that the North and the South just couldn't agree on in the peace agreement. And they had been fighting over this for about 6 months when the women joined the table. So women came to the table, they looked at the map, they sat down, and the women said, that river's dry. The river's dry. Why are you arguing over a dry river? The men did not know that this river was dry, and they thought that they were arguing over a water resource. So this is one example, a small example of what women bring to the table when you diversify representation. And the women knew this because women walk to go get the water. Women spend, let me just see if I have this number, because this is a really great number. Women spend 40 billion hours every year traveling to and from water sources. 40 billion. That's equivalent to the time spent on 1 year's labor for the entire workforce of France. So imagine that. That's something that we call time poverty. So it's women who are in developing countries where they have to get their water, not only likely have to get their water to earn a living, to feed their family, to cook their stove, to do it, to support their daily needs, but they waste a great deal of their day having to go back and forth to get water. Pumps are a wonderful invention, as are wells, and they're things that other organizations are doing we don't deal with. Okay. Conflict transformation, okay, we could go past that. We've covered that. So now we're going to go into some success models. I'm going to start with Liberia, and this is a WCI model. This is our flagship program, and we just received we have been there since 2007. We just received a USAID grant to continue for 3 years. We have a comprehensive model where we work not only top down, but we also work bottom up. So we are not a traditional aid organization in that we do not plan to stay in a country for 10 to 20 years, which there has merit for organizations like the Red Cross and other large development groups. We find local partners like the Ministry of Gender. We partner with them and the National Rural Women's Program, which is a group of elected rural women that was created by the Ministry of Gender. We work with them for over a period of 3 to 5 years to increase the number of women politicians and to build the capacity economically of rural women. And we build that group's infrastructure and capacity to operate that group so we can exit in 3 to 5 years. And that local group is running our program. So in our Liberia model, we are working with the Ministry of Gender to focus on organizational capacity building for this large rural women's group, which is meant to be the social safety net of the country. Has anybody ever worked in Liberia? Okay. Liberia has had 20 years of war. I'm sure you've heard of Charles Taylor and the Blood Diamonds and the conflict. 20 years of war. Women have been displaced for most of that. Most women's education was interrupted. They are coming back to a completely devastated country. They're having to rebuild their homes. Of the women, as I said before, that group of women leaders that I work with that were about 70% illiterate, we're working with a group that is about also 70% widowed. So a lot of the women that are working with us, their husbands are not there. They were killed in battle. The husbands that are alive, many of them are working in South Africa or other countries and sending remittances home because there is not a real strong, viable economic, there's not strong economic opportunities yet for men or women. But women are building the informal sector. Women have not traditionally farmed in Liberia, and they are coming back. They're rebuilding their house. They're trying to figure out land grabbing. Unfortunately, during conflicts, there's unscrupulous people that will sell deeds to numerous people, even if a deed didn't exist. And then people are trying to sort out who owns this home. I own this home. My family have lived here for 100 years, but somebody else has a deed. Wait, but another person has the deed. So it's a very convoluted, complicated restructuring process in Liberia. But what does Liberia have that no other African country has? Female president. First woman president in Africa. So they are ahead of us. The first woman president there, she's really fantastic. She is very dynamic and has been educated in the United States and worked for the World Bank and has a lot of international contacts and is able to bring resources to the country that many people would not be able to bring. So that's really why we're there. There's a huge need, but there's a huge opportunity. Has anybody seen the documentary Pray the Devil Back to Hell? You have? Okay, put it on your list. Pray the Devil Back to Hell. Abigail Disney is the producer. And it's about how women really stopped the war in Liberia. There is a very strong grassroots peace network in Liberia, and they were the ones that got Charles Taylor to go to Ghana to start agreeing to these peace processes and really got him exiled and stopped the war. And those women are there in this country rebuilding it, and that's who we're working with. And I'll just give you one example of the type of women we're working with. So we said to them, the World Food Program was giving out small grants to buy technologies that can improve economic opportunities in the community. So we said, let's brainstorm with this group that we work with. You have about $5,000. How do you want to spend your money? Large problem in Liberia is infrastructure. When I did the assessment there last fall, which was also the rainy season, which I probably should have planned better. But the infrastructure is so poor that we got stuck on the roads and had to sleep in trucks and have the UN pull us out. And we have, wonderful, huge trucks. And we'd come across women who had been traveling for a week to try to get to market. And they couldn't get to market because their car broke down. And then a truck fell over in the middle of the road and nobody could get past that truck. The market's only held one day a week. So they have this bag of produce and their peppers, and it's gone. And their income for that week is gone. So food preservation is a huge problem. Infrastructure is a big problem. So they said, we need to improve the shelf life of our food. So we're going to buy a cassava grinder. So we said, wonderful. Cassava grinders, that's fantastic. You take cassava, that root crop, you grind it, turns into farina, which is kind of like a couscous or millet. And instead of lasting for 2 months, it lasts for 4 months. So, it feeds your family longer. They started renting that out. They had a little stand on Saturdays and started renting that out, and villagers would come and pay, and they'd get their money. The money that they raised from that, they decided to build a women's center. Now, I'm kind of neutral on women's centers. Everybody wants to build a women's center, and you never know what's really going to happen in this center. I've seen a lot that have been built that have gone on to host creative things, and I've seen some that are never really utilized and sit there and maybe have meetings once a month. So we said, okay, let's strategize. Where can we go with this Women's Center? And they said, you know what? We're going to be an example and build a business. Our business model, we're going to build a furniture making shop. Okay, post-conflict country, women, everyone's rebuilding their houses. Like, what a progressive, incredible business model. I mean, talk about really leading the charge of innovation. This is something that really everybody needs. Everyone needs furniture in this country because everything was destroyed. So we said, great, let's see where it goes. They built this shop and they really flourished. Now, a year later, they have made enough money from that to build a guest house and a restaurant next to the government building in their community, which houses 200 people a day. And most people travel about an hour to an hour and a half from their homes to come to this job. So not everyone's going home for lunch. This is a really smart, savvy business model. And this came from a $3,000 intervention. But what it really was is that a group of very smart, energetic women came together and strategized about how they were going to use that small piece of equipment to make a difference in their community. Incredible. So that's one example from us. And then let's go through. There are so many incredible groups doing good work in this field, and we just want to share a few examples. BRAC is a really great group. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Grameen Bank. Okay, so BRAC really takes that Grameen Bank model, and they work with groups of 30 to 40 women at a time who come together and create savings clubs and reinvest and decide who gets a loan at what time, and they strategize about how to spend that loan. I think over the past, between 5 to 10 years, they've given $17 million in loans, and the loans tend to be about $120. So that's an amazing, an amazing amount of wealth that's poured into countries for rural women. Women for Women International is a partner of ours. We really focus on the leadership policy development, and we're moving into this. Even though we do sustainable livelihoods, we think about it from a strategic viewpoint. They really do job training and skills building. Oh, we meant to change that. It's not lie skills. We're not training them how to lie. We're training them in life. They're training them in life skills. But they're a really great organization, and they also focus on men's leadership, which again in this field you cannot ignore the men. CEDPA is another great group that's doing a lot of political participation, and they really focus on the peace process, as does the Initiative for Inclusive Security, which is a partner of ours, and they're really focused on getting more women to be those chief negotiators. I think we may have to talk with them about lobbying the UN to have at least one formal chief negotiator that's a woman. Okay, what can you do? Let's just look at our time frame to see.
And he can test out the sound if you'd like to go back to the girl effect video.
We have about a half hour.
Oh, good. Let's go to the girl effect video and see if that works then. Small social media clip that demonstrates what happens when you invest in girls. And that will segue us into the next conversation. I'm going to give you a few examples of what the roundtable came up with what we can do, but then I really want to hear from you. We are thinking about what we think Americans can do to be engaged in citizen diplomacy from an organizational standpoint, but we really want to brainstorm. And I know as the executive director of this organization, this is something I'm trying to think about all the time. How do we engage more people? How do we get people to really care about our issues and engage them in positive, constructive ways? So let's go to some examples. Okay, social media. We're in a new era, a new world, and social media and YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter really have opened opportunities for communication that we just have never seen before. That really is one of the easiest ways to get engaged. connect to people on Facebook, join Twitter, join petitions. There's groups like Care to Care International. Has anybody joined that petition to save the Iranian woman from stoning? Have you heard about this? Okay, have you joined that petition? So there's a woman that was sentenced to be stoned to death because she committed adultery, or they think maybe she had an affair. What was this? They suspected that she had an affair. And she should have been stoned at least 2 times. And the international community stopped it, really. All of the petitions signed from, the government of Turkey intervened recently. There's such an outcry on Facebook, on Twitter, through petitions that the government heard them, and she is. We hope that there's a positive end outcome, but she should not be here, and she is still alive. So that is something powerful. And this has always existed. You know, Amnesty International has always organized letter writing campaigns, and they're a very powerful group. But that takes some time and thought, and takes conscientious people to sit down. We've engaged youth and people that may not have been as engaged in our topics through Twitter and Facebook, because it's easy for people to send a message to say, hey, did you know this? I really care about this. Can you send this to your friends? And the amount of people you can reach by sending one tweet is amazing. So that's one way that you could get involved. I don't know if we need to watch the older difference. We can skip that. Okay, another way is creating straightforward and creative awareness campaigns. So that is the Girl Effect is one example of that. Now, the Girl Effect is funded by Nike and Novo. So they have a significant amount of resources behind them, and they were able to create that beautiful piece. But there are a lot of groups that are doing this on their own, like this campaign to save that woman. That was really a grassroots movement that reached hundreds of thousands of people. Does anybody else have a good example of a grassroots movement on the social media platform that's been successful? No. Yeah. Wow, that's a great idea. I've never heard of that. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, good. And there is like the Earth campaign too, I think, that mobilized people to turn off lights for one day recently. That was a big thing. Yeah, did you?
Yeah.
Yes, let's give a round of applause to her. Isn't that fantastic? That's a great example, and that's very exciting news. So, yeah, that's wonderful. So this is what we can do. Most people in this room probably have access to a computer, and I'm making assumptions, but I am assuming that most people can access a computer. It's very easy to create an email message. It is very easy to create a short video. We have tons of videos that we create now, which we couldn't have done 10 years ago because we didn't have the technology or we didn't have the editing software, and now we can do it. So we're in a new age to be able to do this ourselves. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Okay, I want to show you this short video too of, I was in Afghanistan in May, training women who are running for parliament, and we trained 625 women. And we came across, I met some of the bravest women that you'll ever meet. We trained 25 key trainers who then would go on to train another 25 women each, for a total of 625 women. And out of those 25 women, those master trainers, 4 of them had fatwas issued against them at some point in the recent 10 years. By their community, because they did not want them to run for office, and they still did run for office. And we know that not all of those women will win. The election results are still being contested, but all of those 625 women created a vision and strengthened their voice. And that voice will never be silenced. And I want to show you one example of a young woman that we trained who's just phenomenal. One way as citizen diplomats that you can get engaged is to find organizations like ours and find these young girls who need mentors and need support and are doing incredibly brave things and really need some advice, need a pat on the back. They're doing amazing, amazing things every day. And our zoo, I'm sure, would love to have, letters written to her supporting her work. And so that's one way that you can get engaged. Let's just show you this brief clip. Like, she is 24 years old. She is supporting her mother and 2 sisters. Her father and brother were killed, and she is working for a women's organization, going to school full-time, and running for parliament. Let's talk about dynamic young women. Okay, is that still...
And they should be confident that yes, I'm powerful, I can do that. So on that time they can achieve.
Well, you've achieved so much already. What are your hopes for the future? And she said, well, I hope that all women in Afghanistan have the opportunities to do what I can do. And maybe one day I'd like to be president. So, yeah, she's amazing. There are women like that out there. There are organizations working with them, and really having a mentor. There are not many mentors for young women in this world, especially in these developing countries, because the women that are in leadership positions are very busy, really are very wanted women. So that's something that you should maybe give some thought to. If you have the time and the energy to do that, reach out to an organization and see if you can find a young girl who, could use some words of support and some mentorship. Okay. Has anybody heard of this Run for the Congo? Yes. This is an amazing story. And for people that, if I misstate facts, please correct me. This woman heard on Oprah, I was watching Oprah, and heard what was happening in the Congo and said, I want to make a difference. And she started running and raising money for the Congo. Can you click onto that site? Okay, here we go. Lisa Shannon. Does it say how much she's raised overall?
Two years ago, I didn't know anything.
Okay, pretty amazing.
About Congo.
So over $300,000 from one woman who watched an Oprah episode and said, you know what, I can make a difference here. So this is what WCI, what we preach is that there's power in one, and there's even more power in mobilization. So one person can make a difference, one person can have a large effect, and when you are energized by a cause, you can then mobilize others, because people will feed off your energy and your passion, and you can mobilize others to make a difference. And it does not have to be $300,000. Every small intervention makes a difference, has a ripple effect. But this was, I love that story. I think it's fantastic that she was watching Oprah and was so moved to create this foundation. Okay. And then one last clip that we want to show. If you haven't read the book, Half the Sky, go get it. Everyone in this room should read it. It's fantastic. It talks about women's stories. We're going to show this clip, and then we'll take a Q&A, and then we have some students from Adelphi University who wants to share some of the research that they found recently. Insert yourself. There's the Half the Sky video. But I'd like to open it up to questions, and I'd also like to hear from you. So I'm sure there's a large amount of resources in this room, and if you have ideas, suggestions, thoughts about how we as an organization can better engage people, if you have questions for me or Sara, we'd love to hear them. And I think there's one right back there. Yes.
Hi, I'm Susan Fiedel. I'm the CEO of Mobility International USA.
Nice to meet you.
We've been around doing international development, specifically working with women with disabilities. And the two things that we're very much interested in is ensuring that when anyone is working with programs with women, that you're including women with disabilities. And we have over 2,000 alumni from over 120 countries. So any of the programs that you're working on, we could help you make sure that you are including women with disabilities, which unfortunately has not yet been done. The second thing is that we also run some of our own programs. We recently had a program called WILD, the Women's Institute for Leadership and Disability. We just had 54 women with disabilities, all types of disabilities, all disability activists from over 43 countries. And so we have this great resource, and we'd like to look at partnering with other organizations to keep this program going. And just lastly, on December 1st, we are going to launch a YouTube video about this program.
Oh, good.
And we would love to work with organizations like you to help this go viral. Where the 54 women from 43 countries will be singing in Arabic, English, Spanish, and sign language, talking about disabled women's empowerment. So I hope we can talk more during the conference, but just wanted to let all of you know and looking for partnerships. And please let us help you think about how to include more disabled women. Thank you.
That's fantastic. What's the name of your organization again?
Mobility International USA, so the website is miusa.org.
Okay. And I will say that the work you're doing is incredible, because we find that handicapped or disabled women are the most marginalized in a society. We don't focus on them specifically, but we like to partner with organizations and countries to make sure that those needs are being addressed, because it is so critical.
Let me just say also, in response to that, that as part of this issue of workplace flexibility, we are partnering with our sister agency, the Office of Disability within Department of Labor, and we're going to do a research summit specifically on how do you do flexibility for people who have disabilities in the workplace. So as we look at these issues surrounding women, we are thinking about those types of issues as we move forward. So I just want to let you know that as we look at the issue in terms of domestically, those are some of the things that we're doing with regards to that, because we want to create a body of research that shows that in a workplace, when you have people who are disabled, that these are ways in which flexibility can be afforded as well.
Yeah, good time.
When you're doing a program, whether it's HIV or reproductive health or civil society, we're really trying to get people to think not about that the disability program is separate or
Yeah.
not in their focus. But these women need to be at your HIV program, your civil society, your literacy programs, and not think about separate programs. Disabled women are the women that are women, so they need to be part of all the programs that you're existing doing, and how to do that, we can help you with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Yep.
So I'm Kim Weichel, CEO of Peace by Peace, which is actually an international women's organization. We support women peace builders in 120 countries. We have almost 20,000 women in our network. We raise and multiply women's voices and connect across various divides, which is very important. We also collaborate with the United Nations. So I have a question for you folks, and that is, with this new wonderful UN Women being created, how can we as organizations ensure it has the authority and resources to make an impact? I'm not sure what the biggest leverage point I, as an organizational leader, can have.
I'm thinking that question myself. Do you have
Well,
that?
I think my understanding is that in order to create UN Women, they combined 4 of the major organizations within the UN so that it would have the resources and sort of have it, I guess, all the resources under one umbrella. And I know that the former president of Chile is now the head of it. And my understanding is that they're really looking for ways in which they can be very impactful with young girls and women across the country. I think there's great opportunity. I don't know the specific person per se, but I think that if they're in the process of reorganizing, I think it's a great time to actually come in and talk to them and be able to have the opportunity to say, well, how are the NGOs going to work with you? And I think that's the important part of the equation. I'm sure they've been thinking about that now.
And actually, that's a good question for people in the room. Does anybody have any ideas? I mean, I think that groups like, maybe we should just talk and approach them and see how we can lobby them to have a larger voice in the UN. Does anybody have other ideas?
There's an existing NGO working group on women, peace, and security that is advising the UN on how they can, and particularly UN women, on how they can implement that dialogue with civil society more.
Is that through
What's it called?
Alternatives or no?
No, the inclusive security is on
Okay.
the working group.
Okay.
It's 14 organizations, and there is a full-time staff who sits within the UN complex.
What was the name of the organization again?
It's called the NGO Working Group on Women, Peace, and Security, which is a New York-based permanent body that's been there for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
They also, on the occasion of the anniversary, instituted a civil society advisory group on 1325, whose mandate was to work with the UN sort of interagency coordinating body on how they can elevate just civil society participation in that process. And I know that those meetings are already ongoing with specialists.
Great. Okay, so good. So that's a good suggestion. That's a great point to bring up. And we should all get in touch with that group and see how we can have a voice in this new agency. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
You go into a country like Congo, there's no way we're building a bank in Congo, USAID, and there's no way that microfinance alone can solve the problem. And in India, we're collaborating with the International Justice Mission, which goes in and buys women out of bondage and slavery and things like that, and does sort of this, post-traumatic stress work. The women get back, their families don't want them because they have no economic value, and so we work with them to help train the people and provide microfinance for them so that once they can get on their feet, then their families want them back again because they can earn money and they have a way to work. So the more we can do collaboration, so it's really inspiring to go out and start something new. There are so many wonderful organizations right now, and I think the one thing that big organizations and government can do is to find these ways to matrix these organizations together in an area, in Liberia, in the Congo, where there's horrible problems with women, a great opportunity, but one organization alone can't do it. And so if that lady was going through the Congo and surround her with like 10 other organizations, I think that would.
I absolutely 100% agree. We try, I know if our organization tries as much as possible to partner, because you're right, you cannot do it alone. We've been fortunate in countries like Liberia. There's a working donor group, a management steering group of all the international aid groups that come together and meet monthly and coordinate and talk about where they work. But I know that that's not typical always. So yeah, that's a great suggestion. So while we are encouraging citizen diplomats to go out and look and initiate, you should also look at what you can build upon. So we're not always recreating the wheel.
That's true. I mean, and as part of the work that we do thousands of collaborations across the country with various types of women's groups, and we do that all the time. I mean, that's part of what our mission is, actually.
Yeah.
I'm with the U.S. Center for Citizens Diplomacy, and if you haven't checked out our website, you should make sure that your organization is listed on our website, which is a great place for you to find other organizations to collaborate with. And maybe it's time that we have a section on there for women's issues where it would be easy for people who address women's issues to go to one tab and
absolutely, that would be wonderful. Okay, so we had one in the back, and then you, and then you, and then you. So we have four waiting. Okay.
I'll stand up because I'm all the way in the back. My name is Leah Madison. I'm a graduate student from Laurie University in the International Development Program. And I just wanted to share two really great, easy-to-use, hands-on tools and resources. I'm a tools person. I like to get things into the citizen. So two great things that I've come across that might help. One earlier, you were talking about the use of social media and spreading messages. Tacticaltech.org is a fantastic organization, and they have a toolkit called King Tactics to turn information into action.
Can you say that a little louder?
The website is
Okay.
And the actual resource is called
10, like 10 the number?
Yes.
Okay.
Tactics to turn information into action. And you can find it online.
Okay, and you had you, I think?
I'm Laurie Cecile. I'm with Sesame Street.
Oh, show in South Africa that addressed HIV/AIDS, and WCI does intense assessments before we go into a country. We hire local staff. We really depend on the people to tell us what to do, and we provide them the strategic tools and the resources to be able to accomplish that. But we are very careful about respecting culture while empowering women. And in some places it's more difficult than others, like in a country like Afghanistan. We engage men as much as possible because typically if you engage men in the conversation, you avoid that backlash. We've been really fortunate to work in post-conflict countries for 12 years, and we have never had a significant problem where a woman either wasn't safe or there was a backlash that killed a program. And I think it's because we spend so much time on the ground. When we were, to say, I was giving the Liberia success story, when we were in Liberia, I was traveling to do this assessment and going to these places, and people said, "Oh, how did you get here?" And I said, "By vehicle." And they said, "We have not seen a foreigner arrive in my town in a car, out in any kind of mode of transportation outside of a helicopter or an airplane in decades, because the roads were so awful and that it was awful. It was an awful trip. But we were on the ground and we hear what's happening on the ground and the how people are living, and we partner, as we said, we partner with local agencies that then take over the work. So we're just helping them strategize. And we find the people that already have the leadership ability and the infrastructure, and we help them build that. Does that answer your question? Okay.
We're also really careful about not putting the women in any danger.
Yes, absolutely.
So many of the post-conflict areas that we work in are, rape as a weapon of war is just one of the things that's accepted. And so we're very, very conscious of that. We also try, as Kerri said, the first thing we try to do is figure out what the line of command is. I mean, if we have to talk with the chiefs, we talk with the chiefs. We understand that many men in many countries feel that if you're giving the women power, you're taking something from them. So we try really hard to work on the notion that if we all work together, there's some really exciting things that are going to happen. This just in.
Okay, great. So let's have the two questions very quickly because we're going to run out of time for the students, and we really want to give the university students the chance to present their findings. They asked for a few minutes at the end.
When we were asking about resources, the political groups are good, but I really would consider the faith-based organizations as well.
And we believe in partnerships. I'm sure Kerri said
we
that.
did talk about. We had a discussion about that already.
If there's not, we've got a partner.
Yeah.
And one of the partners that we're just picking up is a church-based organization, Gaia.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. And the last comment or question.
You mentioned the statistics about pregnancy and childbearing complications.
Yep.
We work in Africa and also
That's amazing. Thank you.
How did they know?
Okay, so I hope, can you all stay for about 5 more minutes just to hear this, to give the students the opportunity to speak? Why don't you guys come up here?
Also, if you have cards, we would love your cards. If you could share that with us.
Yeah. Okay. Yep, you can go right there. You use the.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Farkash, and I'm a junior Leavenworth Global Scholar from Adelphi University with a major in Spanish and adolescent education. Recently, I have been conducting research on improving the educational rights of women and girls in the context of citizen diplomacy. Global citizen diplomacy is a crucial part of multi-track diplomacy, which encompasses the cooperation of governments, organizations, and everyday citizens over a span of various tracks and diverse approaches. Specifically, I have looked at how research, training, and education, or peacemaking through learning, can be used to promote the rights of women. The working group mentioned the concept of the girl effect as an awareness campaign to educate the public and bring to light the necessity of addressing the needs of an adolescent girl at a specific point in her life to ensure a secure future. I'm not sure if everybody, I know we viewed the first girl effect video, but the second video, there's a part 2, and it addresses the fact that by the age of 12, many girls are forced into adulthood, marriage, and childbirth, which impedes their access to education. So I was specifically focusing on that crucial point in their life. While I believe the girl effect is successful at raising awareness for this issue, I believe if the awareness was transferred into more direct, concrete action within the communities of these girls, it could have a positive effect of highlighting the value of girls to men and their communities, as well as increase their opportunities for access to education. While the awareness and learning is absolutely necessary outside of these communities for raising the issue of supporting adolescent girls, a movement to action would utilize learning and training within their communities to showcase the importance that girls receive an education in order to stay happy and healthy to lead successful lives, as well as bring critical improvements to their communities and society. One international nonprofit organization that I have looked at, which is carrying out the girl effect, is Women for Afghan Women. This organization works closely with women in Afghanistan, as well as the Afghan refugee community in Queens, New York, on educating and training programs aimed to empower women and girls, as well as provide oppressed women and girls with safe havens and legal assistance to allow them to gain resources they need to be safe, secure, and empowered. Women for Afghan Women emphasizes the value and importance of the individual woman or girl on a personal level, which is effective at educating and ensuring the success and value given to each woman within their communities. Many of these women later go on to utilize their initial training to train and empower other women and girls to take action in their own communities. My question for the members of this roundtable discussion is, aside from the organizations already mentioned, what other innovative programs or most effective strategies do you believe that can be implemented or developed to truly carry out the girl effect in war-torn or developing countries?
Do we have time to answer that?
Sure. I know we kind of went over it already. That's why I was kind of like...
Yeah.
I just wanted to, in your opinion, what you believe is the most effective, because I found that the specific training programs which you discussed enable a ripple effect among the women that you affect to later go on and empower women in their communities, creating bonds that are sustainable.
In a word, education.
Education.
If you educate the girls, it completely changes the texture, the nature, the future, everything of the community, and we've just got to make sure that happens.
Right.
And we've got to make sure that the people in the villages respect that.
Mm-hmm. That was my view as well. So thank you.
Good. Well, thank you. Let's give a round of applause.
Hilda Perez. I'm currently a senior at Adelphi University, and I'm studying international studies and political science, and would hope to go into the nonprofit sector, which is why I'm very excited to be here, so I apologize if I stumble over my words. Based on the recommendations that have been presented in this forum, I would like to add to the discourse the research that I have found concerning the recommendation of direct contact in women's issues, in which was mentioned before. Although I strongly agree that direct contact between local and international women's movements is crucial to create a very humanistic solution, we must take this a step further by creating a multi-track approach. Traditionally, as you may all know, diplomacy consists of only government interactions. However, today a more complex approach has evolved in response to complex issues, on specific issues being one specific issue being women's economic development and integration into society. In the 21st century, multi-track diplomacy creates a revolutionary shift in the norm by encompassing local women's movements, non-governmental organizations, governments, as well as many different actors, as we have seen and just in this very room. Developing a cross-sector approach creates substantial advancement can occur within the realm of women's issues. This more complex theory of diplomacy, which I had founded in my research, was introduced by Ambassador John MacDonald and Dr. Louise Diamond in the book Multi-Track Diplomacy. Certain organizations are emerging as strong examples by bridging the gaps between systems, and as I have seen now, Women's Campaign International falls into this case. For example, Kiva, an organization that offers microfinance solutions as a means of economic empowerment for women, transcends this gap that exists and works on different levels to encourage development and promote systemic positive social change. The NGO provides the medium through financial support and with the monetary assistance of citizens here in the United States, directly to local women who then in turn become involved directly in the economic control of their resources. Further, this increases the possibilities for women's political and civic engagement. As you can see, a complex approach can lead to positive impact. Imagine the possibilities, an intricate web created by an economic-based organization, possibly coinciding with, let's say, another education-based organization, with active participation of both local and international women can make. Again, direct contact is very much needed to raise awareness. However, we must remember these issues do not exist in a vacuum. There are many social, political, religious, and cultural actors that mold a woman's position in society. A multi-track approach can be the necessary catalyst in response to these issues. However, the question arises, how can organizations, like many of these seated here today, tailor this approach to their own mission while creating the most optimal and efficient outcome via multi-track diplomacy? And even more importantly, why hasn't it yet reached its full potential?
That is a fantastic question, and unfortunately, I don't think we have enough time to answer it, but I would just like to congratulate you and your colleague, because that's a great presentation. We talked here about being citizen diplomats, mentoring young people, so get college students to come up here and present. But we'd like you to share the questions and take our card, and let's have this conversation offline. Thanks to the group. You've been really interactive, really great. I hope you gained something from this. If you'd like to collaborate, please come up and get our cards. Thanks to Sara for being here. We're really lucky to have her. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah.
Thank you for having me.